Upstairs at Froelich, show 113, reel 1.
You're a smart kid. I'll figure it out.
This isn't the first time that we've had to do some kind of a tribute or a memoriam to somebody. I have a feeling we're going to be doing a lot of these. I mean, we actually started. There was a weird thing that was going on for a little while last year. Me and Anderson, every time we brought up a particular person's name, they would die the next week. It was like the weirdest thing. Like Toby Hooper was one. We were when we were doing, I think we were doing the MGM history of video, and we did a whole thing on Life Force, right?
Right.
And the next week he died, so we had to do a little for Toby Hooper tribute. It was weird.
The reason I wanted to do this is because on the last podcast we started talking about the Hitcher.
We did. We spoke about the Hitcher. I don't think it made it into the episode. We were talking. That was after. The thing is, from what I read, he died on the 19th. It's just that the family withheld the news until the funeral. That was, I think, what it was, and it only came out today.
It was unexpected, and to you, to me, to a lot of people, he was one of our heroes, you know?
He was somebody who was in everything that I saw. It was like a weird thing because I knew about him a little bit because I worked in video stores. So there were a lot of these titles that he was in that I had no idea he was in. He worked, like he did a lot of movies for Paul Verhoeven back in the Netherlands. One of his first movies was a very controversial title called Turkish Delight. And then, after that, he did a movie called Katie Tipple. He did Soldier of Orange. He did Spetters. These were movies for Rutger Hauer, and he worked for 10 years in the Netherlands before he even came over here. His first movie, of course, was Nighthawks. That was his American debut.
Yeah, I was going to say it was Bruce Malmuth who directed that. That pretty much gave him the first start that he ever got in the American film industry. And what really threw me off about this guy was that he was a Danish actor, but he had one of the most flawless American accents you could ever think of.
Other than his Nordic build, his Aryan good looks, you would never think that he was anything other than American. But
you wouldn't.
I believe that in one of my Blade Runner books, I have an excellent Blade Runner book, Future Noir, I think it's called. Very comprehensive study of the making of the movie. He talked about how he watched a lot of American movies. That was like his thing. When they came over to the Netherlands, years later, he would watch them, he would study the speech patterns, and he would study the faces of the American actors. A lot of people wouldn't really figure out that he was from the Netherlands when he came out. But even, he was a little weird too, though. He was eccentric. I think in his audition for Blade Runner, he had these big Elton John sunglasses on, and he had this sweater that was a sketch or a painting of a fox with two ruby red eyes with actual rubies in them or something or something like that. So they thought he was a little bit weird. They thought he was, because this is how he was dressing. I guess he was doing it to get attention. I'm not really sure because, actors, they like to get attention that way. They want to be memorable when you walk in for an audition. It was like, who is that weird looking guy with the Elton John sunglasses? Oh, that was Rutger Hauer. Yeah. But
I think you and I can both agree that when we all think of Blade Runner, we don't think of Harrison Ford. We don't think of Sean Young. We all think of Rutger Hauer. When I think of Blade Runner, I think of Roy Batty. I don't ever think for 1 second about Harrison Ford or Sean Young or anybody else in that movie. That movie to me is a Rutger Hauer movie.
Yeah, I asked my wife earlier if she had any thoughts about Rutger Hauer. What was it about him that really stuck out? And it was the fact that he was frightening. There was something very intense. That's the word she used. She said intense. That he is and always was an intense actor, but he also had a sense of humor too.
I mean, the man did Hobo with a Shotgun, for crying out loud. He had a sense of humor.
A Hobo with a Shotgun. That was a Grindhouse movie that was made, and it was made, I guess, officially, with authorization from Tarantino and Rodriguez, right? That was part of some kind of a contest where they made a trailer, and if the trailer was picked, you got to make a feature film, right?
I think it had something to do with that. The whole story went when Grindhouse in 2007 was playing across the country, every country had a chance to submit their own fake trailer. And in Canada, they chose Hobo with a Shotgun. And the trailer had gotten such a positive response that they just decided to make a movie out of it. Kind of like what happened with Machete. Like how
Machete,
that,
yeah.
Yeah, that trailer got such a positive response where everyone's saying, hey, where's the Machete movie? You know, and then Robert Rodriguez said, fuck it, I'll just go make Machete.
Yeah.
And then Jason Eisner, who did the trailer for Hobo with a Shotgun, he said, I got such a positive reception from this. Fuck it, I'll just go make Hobo with a Shotgun. And I think Rodriguez or Tarantino really didn't care. And it turned out to be just this amazing movie that was actually better than Grindhouse.
These movies that he appeared in the Netherlands with Paul Verhoeven. It's so weird too, because I don't even recall that Verhoeven directed. Did he? I think he did. He directed Flesh and Blood, which was technical, I guess. But the thing is, it was a co-production between the United States, Netherlands, and Spain. But Verhoeven did direct it with Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh, who he was also in The Hitcher with.
Of course.
And
The Hitcher is just another unforgettable film.
The Hitcher, that movie completely knocked me on my ass. It was not what I was expecting. I had heard about it for years. I wasn't able to watch it for some reason at the time, and it just sort of slipped under my radar. And I finally got to see it maybe 2 years ago when we did our Paul Verhoeven show on Extreme Cinema. We talked about was it? No, it was Eric Red. I'm sorry. We were talking about Eric Red because Eric Red wrote The Hitcher, and then he wrote and directed Cohen and Tate, and he wrote and directed Body Parts. But we talked about The Hitcher, and I got to see it. It was so not what I was expecting. I was expecting kind of like a routine, run-of-the-mill kind of maybe Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents kind of thing about a hitchhiker who is just menacing a driver on the road, or, thanks for the ride, lady, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it turned out to be this incredible psychological examination of just one person terrorizing another person. And there's such that great scene in the diner where C. Thomas Howell, of all people, probably his best performance ever, including Soul Man. And he's in the diner and he's saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And Rutger Hauer just takes those 2 coins, puts them on his eyes, and he says, "You're a smart kid. You figure it out." And that was just, he's so chilling in that role. I mean, I know they remade it with Sean Bean, and Sean Bean's an actor I really like too, but I don't think Sean Bean has that level, that presence that Rutger Hauer has.
No, the problem with Sean Bean is you cast him in something he's supposed to die. I mean, that's how it always goes with Sean Bean. You put him in your movie, yeah, he's going to die 30 or 40 minutes in. We know how it goes. With Rutger, for me, I love The Hitcher. It's near and dear to my heart.
It's seriously one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, and is right up there. It instantly got into my top 5 because of just the impact that it had on me watching it. I could not, it was never, I was like, I'm going to put the movie on. I'll do I couldn't do the dishes. I had to keep watching this movie.
Blade Runner, for me, will always be my number 1. But if I had to pick anything else in the top 5, I will always say The Hitcher is number 2. But then, strangely enough, I will follow that up with Blind Fury.
Blind Fury. Now, Blind Fury was made for HBO, right?
No, that actually was a theatrical film. It was made by Philip Noyce.
Huh.
It actually did go to theaters.
Philip Noyce has had an on-again, off-again career.
Yeah, he's had a very up-and-down career, but Blind Fury the whole thing with that movie is it was a take on Zatoichi, the blind swordsman, and it was just an Americanized version of that. But you know what? Rutger Hauer took what would be considered a bottom-of-the-barrel script, and he elevated it to so many heights because of his performance.
It's so weird because I had only ever heard of this movie when it was advertised, and HBO made a big deal about advertising it. And
I actually heard of it through my girlfriend at the time back when I was 16 or 17. She said, "Hey, honey, you need to watch this weird movie. My dad loves it. It's called Blind Fury." I rented it, and I was so blown away by this movie. I was like, I should not enjoy this film by any means, but God, how I love this movie.
Well, this is actually an early Philip Noyce movie, so it was like he wasn't even a name yet. If you want to debate whether or not he was a name, he directed a few.
He did Dead Calm. Yeah, he did Dead Calm before he did Blind Fury. So he had already kind of sort of made a name for himself because, dude, let's just face it, not to get too off tangent, we'll just leave it at this. Dead Calm would not be a great movie if not for fucking Billy Zane. Split Second.
Split Second, that totally slipped my mind because that was a movie that I watched repeatedly on cable TV. It played a lot. That was a movie that got a very small release, but it was one that really kind of became more famous as a rental. And it's what really saves it is Rutger Hauer, but it's kind of a Blade Runner ripoff where you have, I guess, climate change, you have polar ice caps melting, and then you have like water on the street. They couldn't really afford, I guess, constant rain machines or anything, but they did have water on the street. Everybody wears boots or whatever. There seems to be a killer out there. They don't quite know what it is. But his character is like this kind of construction of he runs on cigarettes, chocolate, and coffee constantly. The movie's populated with all these British actors that you'll see later in life get more popular. Like Pete Postlethwaite is in the movie.
Yep.
And then his partner is played by this guy who made recurring appearances on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as one of the Watchers. And then there's Michael J. Pollard, of course, Kim Cattrall looking gorgeous, but she's got her Star Trek 6 haircut still, so it's short and cropped.
Yeah, because she just literally got done with Star Trek 6 when she did that movie.
And from what I understand, Kim Cattrall got along really well with Rutger Hauer. They were like buddies on the film. They were trading stories with each other, giving each other advice and stuff like that.
And which is ironic because you have one of the most difficult actresses in Hollywood to work with, with the easiest actor to work with.
Yeah.
That was the thing about Rutger. No matter what movie he did, no matter if it was a big Hollywood movie or a piece of shit direct-to-video movie, nobody had a bad thing to say about him.
And he always put everything into it. You know, we were talking about another actor who did that. Wasn't last time. It was the time. Oh, Travolta. Travolta gave his all, no matter how shitty the project was.
Out of the great body of work that he's done, he has done some fucking stinkers.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, that's probably why he's on Upstairs at Froelich in this episode. I do want to mention one movie that was really awesome, and this was an HBO production. It was called Blindside. I couldn't place the title before, but I got it a couple hours ago. It's Blindside with Ron Silver and Rebecca De Mornay and Rutger Hauer, and it's very much a kind of Alfred Hitchcock scenario where Ron Silver and his wife are returning from some party or something. They're a little drunk and they accidentally run over and kill a man. A couple of hours or days later, Rutger Hauer appears at their doorstep and tells them he knows what they did, and he starts to extort and blackmail them until they have no choice but to try and defend themselves, because he's kind of helping himself to everything in their house, and he's starting to put moves on Rebecca. It's a really good movie directed by Jeff Murphy, and it has.
I know Jeff Murphy did Free Jack and Under Siege 2.
That's yes. It's got a good cast too. Jonathan Banks is in it, who was in Free Jack. Wow. He was in Free Jack, right? God damn you, Resendek! And Mariska Hargitay, who we know from Law and Order, of course, and the daughter of Jane Mansfield and Mickey Hargitay. Great film. I encourage, if you can find it. I don't know if you can find it because it's one of those HBO movies, and HBO is really difficult. It's really difficult to find anything of any quality.
That's what's funny, because most HBO movies are very, very easy to find. Ironically enough, the only Rutger Hauer movie that's like impossible to find on DVD is Split Second.
Yeah, I was looking around for that earlier today.
And now for those of
I probably have a VHS of it though.
I just want to say, for those of you that listen to this podcast, don't say we're wrong. You will go on eBay right now and you'll see a person selling a brand new factory sealed copy of Split Second for $19.95. Just FYI, those are bootleg copies. Okay, real copies of that movie are in Warner Brothers snapper cases, and they go for like $40-$50. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to go for a lot higher now.
Oh yeah. But they're probably selling these bootlegs because they're very scarce. So it's like if you have a certified copy of the movie. Are you talking about DVD or VHS?
Yeah, it's gotten so bad to these days. Like I had a conversation with a guy about it, and he got duped. What they're doing these days is these people from the Netherlands or wherever they're from, they're actually making one-to-one copies of the DVD. Mm-hmm. They are factory pressing them, not using DVD-R media, and they are actually releasing them as legitimate copies. The problem is they're not legitimate because they can look legitimate. They'll look like a real DVD. You put it in your computer, it has zero copy protection on it. And though that to me, it could, like they say, it looks like shit, it smells like shit, it must be shit. And I don't like DVDs like that because I want something that's an authorized release. I don't want to give
Well,
money to a bootlegger.
I don't know. I'm of two minds about bootlegs. If I can't find it anywhere else, I mean, if I seriously can't, and if they want to charge an arm and a leg for something because it's so scarce, but somebody's offering a bootleg DVD, especially because you can make really, I mean, like, it's almost indistinguishable, right?
Right, but here's my whole thing. I don't disagree with anything that you're going to say. Do not misrepresent it as real. That's my argument.
I mean, I've had my I have
don't
a
say
couple.
It's real.
I actually have a couple of bootleg records that are worth far more than anything else because it was a very limited run. I procured the Star Wars Despecialized Edition, which is not official, and it's the only way to see the movies in their original format.
But that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying, don't release a DVD. Don't say it's an actual DVD when in fact it's a bootleg, because you're misrepresenting yourself. Yes. And at the end of the day, it's just wrong.
I agree with that. Don't go around saying something is bona fide when it's not.
Exactly. So I mean, I got lucky with my copy of Split Second. I found it at a used record store for $5 when it was going for like $60-$70 at the time, and they mispriced it. They had no idea of what it was worth. I got very lucky and got a copy of that. There is a Blu-ray that was released overseas, and I can import it, but I hear rumblings that they're going to release it over here in the States, so I'm going to wait.
Ladyhawke. How about that one?
Oh, great movie.
Directed by Richard Donner with early performance by Michelle Pfeiffer, who looks really good next to Rutger Hauer, and of course Matthew Broderick. Big spectacle, very very cute. The other guy. There's another guy in there. Wasn't the other guy from War Games in Ladyhawke as well?
Oh, I got to look that up. You're making me think. Yes,
John Wood. John Wood is in Ladyhawke, and he played Dr. Stephen Falcon in War Games.
Okay, that's very interesting. I did not know that.
This was kind of actually it was on uncredited rewrite by David Peoples, who wrote Blade Runner, and Tom Mankiewicz, working from Edward Kamara and Michael Thomas's script, and I remember those two names from something else. But it was edited by Stuart Baird, who went on to become a director, with mixed results. Executive Decision and Star Trek Nemesis.
Executive Decision's a good movie. I don't care what anybody says.
That was the one with that was Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal, right? Got the two of them.
Where Steven Seagal gets offed in the first 30 minutes.
It was a battle of the squinty eyes and gritty accent. But this was a co-production, actually. Ladyhawke was a co-production of Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox, but Warner Brothers had the video distribution rights, and I believe there might be a clamshell. There was maybe one of the last clamshells ever made.
It was a clamshell. You don't have to believe it. I have seen it. Unfortunately, the one copy I was going to buy had a really bad amount of mold in it, so I had to put it back. I remember there was a clamshell that it was one of the last, along with Vision Quest.
So I always remember really enjoying this because it was kind of it was like a fairy tale, but it was kind of done with a contemporary American sensibility to it. So it was a lot of fun, even with Matthew Broderick as comic relief.
It was better than Legend.
I don't know if I agree with you. I thought Ladyhawke was really cute. But Legend, I don't know. Legend.
Okay, how about I meet
visually, I'd say Legend has it beat.
I'll meet you in the middle. It was better than the theatrical cut of Legend, but the international cut of Legend is better than Ladyhawke.
Yeah, okay. You're not a fan of Tangerine Dream?
Yeah, I prefer Jerry Goldsmith's score, sir. Sorry.
Actually, that totally changes the movie. When I saw, because I have both in a little DVD set. I was so used to hearing the Tangerine Dream stuff because I saw it on cable, and that's the way they showed it. And then I pop in the newer version with the Jerry Goldsmith score. It totally changes the movie. All right, now I got another one for you. This is another favorite of mine. Even though a lot of it doesn't make any sense, but the Osterman Weekend from
Never seen it.
1983, directed by Sam Peckinpah. I wrote a review of it for Vintage Cable Box, but then watching it again, it just, I don't know, for some reason I really liked it when I was a kid, and then it turns into one of those movies that makes no sense as you grow older,
I can't talk much about Osterman Weekend, but what I can say, another great movie, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, that's right, Buffy. He was in that. He played the kind of master, I guess, of the vampires in that scenario. They sort of took a little bit, Joss Whedon rewrote a little bit of his movie for the pilot and for part of that first season of the show when it aired. And in this one, it's It's Christy Swanson, and it's Luke Perry, and you got Donald Sutherland playing the Watcher, and you have Rutger Hauer as the villain, the vampire villain or foe or something in that. It was an okay movie.
You know what? Rutger Hauer made it a great movie because, okay, number one, that movie is so far removed from what Joss Whedon wrote, it's ridiculous. But what I personally think is they let Rutger Hauer ad-lib, because the lines that he said in that movie, those were not in the script. Like, my favorite line, "I will split you like rotted fruit, all of you." That was something that Rutger Hauer just came off of his ass. And that was just a great line. That was not in the script. That was pure Rutger Hauer ad-libbing right
This
there.
cast is ridiculous. I'm looking at it right now. It's got not only those people, but it also, I forgot, it had Paul Rubens in it. Pee Wee Herman. Has Hilary Swank, David Arquette, Stephen Root, who's a great actor. He's great in everything. If that is the actual, let me see here. Yes, Thomas Jane is in this movie. Candy Clark, Rattle Badenkoff, Ben Affleck, Ricky Lake, Seth Green, and Alexis Arquette all appear in the movie.
So many before they were stars in this movie.
Yeah.
People who went on to have great careers.
It's strange. I mean, Luke Perry is probably the only name a lot of people will recognize, the target audience, which was a bunch of teeny boppers. You know, a lot of kids liked this movie at the time, which was 1992. And then the adults they'll dig Rutger Hauer, they'll dig Donald Sutherland, but it's weird. Christy Swanson, you barely know. I barely knew anything about Christy Swanson. I remember a couple of years after that, I saw this movie that she did with Charlie Sheen called The Chase,
which is another great underrated movie.
Directed by Adam Rifkin. I saw that in a free preview, actually. I forgot what it was. I think, I know what it was. I went to see, because I got in line early at a Sam Goody, I believe, in the city, and to get passes for Pulp Fiction, because Pulp Fiction was having a special premiere at the Beacon Theater. And I got the passes to see Pulp Fiction. And when I went in to see Pulp Fiction, they were handing out passes for The Chase. So I grabbed that too.
I saw that because, I believe it or not, back in the 90s on a recommendation. Someone told me, hey, watch this movie. You'll laugh your ass off. Turns out it was a funny-ass movie.
It was,
and it's criminally underrated.
It is. I had seen The Dark Backward a couple of weeks before, so I knew the name Adam Rifkin. I was like, my God, that was such a strange movie with Judd Nelson. It's so freaking weird. Pork juice. Everybody's drinking pork juice out of a carton. He has an arm sticking out of his back, and he becomes like this sideshow spectacle, and he becomes really famous. Such a strange movie.
Adam Rifkin did a lot of fucked up movies, but one of the other ones that I recognized him for was Detroit Rock City.
Detroit Rock City, starring Kiss.
I'm trying to think.
There was another HBO movie that he did. He apparently did a couple of movies for HBO, but he did a really good one with Mimi Rogers. It takes place in the future, and it was called Deadlock. They changed.
I actually have that on VHS.
Do you have it with the changed name Wedlock, or is it still? Because when it was released on HBO, it was called Deadlock, and then they changed the title, I guess, a couple of years later for either home media or whatever to Wedlock.
You know what? Speaking of which, I just thought of another really good movie that doesn't get talked about. Past Midnight.
Past Midnight. Now that is a movie that Quentin Tarantino helped to polish. Actually, he wrote it. It was one of his first jobs. It was Paul Giamatti's first movie, and I know about this because I was just recently looking up some early material on Quentin Tarantino to prepare for a possible special we might do about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it showed that he had done some work because he worked for Cinetel. He started getting jobs because he got an agent. He got Catherine James, who hooked him up with Cinetel, and I believe Cinetel produced this movie. And he did uncredited. Well, he rewrote the script, and the producer, Lisa Hanson, I think was her name, wanted to give him credit, but he turned down the credit. So she gave him an associate producer credit on the movie.
Okay.
That was his first job, basically, and he used some of that money to put together his crew for Reservoir Dogs.
Very interesting.
When he was shooting that. Also, Natasha Richardson is in this movie too with Rutger Hauer.
Well, there you go. You know what? You learn something new every day.
And a pretty good cast, actually. You got Rutger Hauer. He's a star. Natasha Richardson, Paul Giamatti, Clancy Brown, Tom Wright, Guy Boyd. Yeah, it's a pretty good. He plays this guy who went to jail because he was found guilty of killing his pregnant wife or something like that. But it turns out it was all based on circumstantial evidence. I remember this movie.
I got it years back on Laserdisc. I remember I got it in a lot, and I was like, okay, cool. This is just a Rutger Hauer movie. I'll check it out. I was actually very impressed with it, and now I know why I was impressed with it, because it had some Tarantino-isms to it, you know?
I guess there was some Tarantino in there, yeah. But it was weird because it was distributed by New Line Cinema, Cineplex Odeon, which, was kind of put in place a couple of years before, so that they would have a company that would be able to release Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ. So Cineplex Odeon produced that movie. But it also Columbia TriStar, so there were 3 different companies. Also, it was shot by Bob Yeoman, who has worked with Wes Anderson and Kevin Smith. It has music by Steve Bartek, who mainly was a sound engineer, but he worked with a lot of big musicians like Elliot Goldenthal, and he worked with Danny Elfman and people like that. So there were a lot of people who worked on this movie, and it really, I don't even think it got much of a. It wasn't even released. It was bought by USA, and USA showed it.
It was just a straight to video movie that probably could have had some legs, but due to the problems it had, it just went straight to video. But at least, it somewhat found an audience, but it's just one of those movies a lot of people forget about. They don't ever talk about.
I got to look at that one again. Now there's another one that was released. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was made as a movie by Tarantino's writing partner Roger Avary, but I don't think it ever got a release theatrically. Instead, it showed up on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was called Mr. Stitch, where it's kind of like a Frankenstein pastiche, where he's playing the doctor, and Will Wheaton, of all people, plays his creation. And it has Nia Peoples and Ron Perlman in it, too. But Roger Avary wrote, produced, and directed it. Oh, Rutger Hauer co-produced it with Roger Avary. I think Rutger Hauer probably gave him the pull necessary to get the movie made.
Never seen that one. I just
has Tom Savini in it, too, and Ron Jeremy, of all people.
Oh, wow.
Ron Jeremy, who pops up in Adam Rifkin movies all the time.
There were 2 more I had off the top of my head that I totally just forgot about until now. One that was straight to video. A lot of people forgot about it. Crossworlds. I remember that was an HBO movie back in the 90s. It was just this.
Oh, wow,
nice,
yeah. Jack Black is in it.
I remember how
and Andrea Roth, who was gorgeous. She was like one of those screen queens who was so gorgeous. She's the blonde. God, she's lovely.
And another good one that I love from Ernest Dickerson, starring Ice-T, Surviving the Game.
I knew you were going to say that.
Surviving the Game. Another great movie with Rutger.
Yes.
That was another movie
it was okay. What was it? It was like a Most Dangerous Game situation.
Right.
Kind of like that. What's that other one? Our first episode of Extreme Cinema, we did a movie directed by David Pryor starring his brother Ted Pryor. It was called Deadly Prey. Sorry, Deadly Prey. And then he made a sequel later called Deadliest Prey. And I remember, okay, this is a funny story. We wanted to have David Pryor on the show, and I reached out to him because he had a Facebook account. I'm saying, we're starting this new podcast. Would you like to come on and talk about Deadly Prey and Deadliest Prey? I get no response from him. And then I'm interviewing Fred Olen, and Fred Olen tells me, oh, he's dead. You didn't know? And I was like, no, I had no idea he was dead. And then I messaged him again. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were dead. I was like, I got a lot of laughs. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were dead.
Out of that whole filmography that he did, I think one of the coolest movies he ever did was Dracula 3D with Dario Argento.
I have that, actually. Dario Argento starring his daughter. Again, Asia. I remember that one too, yeah.
I mean, it was a little schlocky movie, but again, why we're talking about Rutger, he elevated it.
But it was also wasn't that one of Dario Argento's experiments with HD? It was shot in HD, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was shot in HD, and then and he shot it with 3D in mind, and all this other stuff.
Right,
and Argento was just trying to stay relevant.
I remember the first time I saw Nighthawks. It wasn't in the theater because I was too young, but I did manage to see it on. I believe it was on ABC, and of course it was cut to ribbons.
Of course.
Where Stallone is saying, "You're fucking dead! You're fucking dead!" All you hear is, "You're dead! You're dead!" When they go into the nightclub and they're looking around, they're trying to figure out where could this Wolfgar guy be? And also, he changed his face. He had like the big thick beard, and he changes his face. He's dancing with this chick. He's looking in Stallone's direction, and he knows that Stallone is staring at him. And then finally Stallone screams, "Wolfgar!" And then there's a big shootout.
I mean, I absolutely love the ending of the movie with
Him
Stallone
dressed up as
Stallone dressing in drag.
He's
and just blowing him away.
Yeah, he's dressed up as the Bionic Woman, or Michael Caine at the end of Dressed to Kill or something like that. You're not expecting that, no, and certainly Rutger Hauer's character was not expecting that.
That's a movie that really, it got talked about over the years. And what's really funny about that movie is like it's always been in an altered version because of the music rights.
Really? Oh,
yeah, because the first ever Laserdisc release was the DiscoVision release in like 82, 83. And during the disco scene, they played Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
And
they changed it, yeah.
Yep. All subsequent releases had generic music in its place because they couldn't get the rights to that song.
Which kind of...
So up until that time, you had to have the original DiscoVision Laserdisc release to get that song. But luckily, Shout Factory came out with their version, and it reinstated.
So
Brown
they
Sugar.
restored it. So they had to pay rights to it or something. Rutger Hauer was he had quite the female following. He also had quite a male following too. But he was a guy who was like manly, but he knew how to act. He had the eloquence of a Shakespearean type actor. He did some Shakespeare too. But he had like this complete physicality about him. It was very strange. I was looking at some of his specs, and according to different sources, he was only 6'1", which makes me taller than him. But I would feel like a mouse next to that guy. Even strangely enough, Harrison Ford around the same height, but he towers over Harrison Ford. He's such an imposing physical actor too.
If I were an actor, I would not want to stand toe-to-toe with him because I know at any given moment, at any given time, he could outact me at the snap of a finger. That man was the embodiment of every good actor that any person would ever want to work with because, like you said, he always brought his A game no matter what project he was working on. He always gave his best. And every time you saw a movie he was in, you would enjoy it more because he was in it.
Yeah. Most recently, I think what I saw him in the theater most recently was a long time ago, but it was Batman Begins. He was in.
Yep.
He played the head of Wayne Enterprises at the time, after Bruce Wayne's parents died. And the reason Nolan cast him in that was because of Blade Runner. Because if you look at Batman Begins, a lot of it is inspired heavily by Blade Runner, by the look of Gotham City, right down to the people on bikes going by in the rain. A lot of this was homage to Blade Runner.
Another movie that was done because of Blade Runner, Sin City.
That's
where
right.
He was cast as Cardinal Rourke.
And he was extremely frightening in that movie with his shaved head. Well, Sin City was experimental anyway. He was trying to make everything, every picture, every frame in that movie look like a piece of art. And he makes Rutger Hauer look almost like a living oil painting in that movie with all of the wrinkles.
He was cast strictly because of Blade Runner, because that movie has that Blade Runner-esque quality to it even though it's a black and white film, with the dreariness and the raininess of the city. What better person to put in that movie than Rutger Hauer?
Yeah, yeah. And also, Frank Miller also being a huge Blade Runner fan.
There really isn't much more that we can say about the man, other than, honestly, there have been a lot of people who have come and gone over this last year. We're into July, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But this one, it hits really hard.
It really does.
It does.
Yeah.
Because he was a cult hero to a lot of us, myself included.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I'll always remember Blade Runner the most out of all the work that he did. Although I'll always remember Blade Runner. I'm going to probably watch it again very soon. And
definitely.
Also, The Hitcher. I'm going to watch The Hitcher again because I want to watch it with my wife because she's never seen it.
I'm definitely going to watch Blade Runner sometime in the next couple of days. I'm probably going to pop on Blind Fury just because I want to laugh and watch Rutger Hauer doing what he does best.
Yeah, which is scaring the shit out of you, but also making you laugh.
We really did lose a true talent today.
Yeah.
We can say it was the 19th, but he was 1 in a fucking million.
Yeah.
And it sucks that he's gone.